Thank you everyone for coming to our fourth session of the Heifer Academy Management Webinar Series. Today we have Dr. Joao Costa. Today he's going to be speaking with us on the future of heifer rearing, the use of precision livestock technology, animal behavior, and nutrition science. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Joao Costa as our speaker for today's session. I've listened to his talks a number of times in different conferences, so I was really excited when he was available to speak for today's webinar. Dr. Costa is a assistant professor in animal and veterinary sciences at the University of Vermont, where he focuses on dairy cattle behavior, welfare, and precision technologies. Originally from Brazil, he earned his Master's of Science in Agroecosystems with a focus on dairy science, ethology, and animal welfare from the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil and a PhD at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Costa's research is renowned for combining cutting-edge precision technology with a deep understanding of animal behavior and welfare. His studies have led to advances on how dairy farmers monitor and improve cow comfort, health, and productivity. He has authored numerous scientific publications and is a sought-after speaker, particularly on improving management practices that promote sustainable and ethical dairy farming. We're privileged to have Dr. Costa with us today, and I'm confident his expertise will enrich our conversation on animal welfare and the latest advances in precision livestock technology. Welcome, Dr. Joao Costa, and take it away.
Yeah, Cora, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here discussing some of the research we are doing and especially highlighting some of the work that, well, the guys do. I joke that I'm just the ugly face that go around showing the work that they are here doing in Burlington, Vermont now before in Kentucky. And what we discuss a little bit is to try to give, obviously, a little bit of information on management of dairy cattle, but especially now, right? Like that we are
Hmm.
in this time where a lot of technology are being made commercially available to be
Hmm.
used on calves, how to do that. We do a lot of work with cows as well, but how to make on-farm decision based on continuously collected data from precision technology. So it's always a pleasure, and that's what I will try to do, is to go over, especially on the nutrition side, a little bit on the disease detection,
Yeah.
how it works, and especially how farms can use that data to make management decisions. So is my slides like working well
Yep.
and let
I
me
can
share?
see it.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
So yeah, this like 40 minutes or so, a little bit more, because I was deleting slides, but I put some back because I think it's important for us to discuss. I will try to go through that idea of, what is precision livestock farming? I think everyone kind of already got a sense, but that idea of using technology that monitor animals to make decisions of management and others. And I will try to, because the big thing associated with technology right now is that we can move, I will not say away, but we can move deeper
Mm.
to manage the group, to manage the individuals, and especially here, I will show some data, not just actually on milk feed, automated milk feeder, but like how to use that data. And it's funny because we started with automated milk feeder and now just data in general, and especially
Uh,
working with calf ranches and other individual sides of getting data to make those decisions, a little bit of disease management, all based on example. So
mhm.
my thing is always, I like to start saying that like we have technology for everything, right? Even for us. But I like to start on the problem. And the problem here is to build the blocks, right, of our animals that are going to be productive in the milking parlor pretty much 2 years later. And for us to identify that problem of, okay, calves are getting sick, calves are not growing as much, our calves are becoming super expensive. So having animals that are going to be used for replacement on our industry are fundamental, and building those blocks are of essence for us to do a great job. So I'm really going to focus a lot on average daily gain. It's not because average daily gain is the only data that we can have, but it's a very easy data that is available to most of the farms, and especially we target a lot of our management, or we evaluate a lot of our management based on that, right? Like if we go make diets for calves, if we want to see farms, if we want to benchmark, normally we are using how many pounds per day or how many kilos per day these animals are getting as a KPI, and that is because average daily gain involves this plethora of variables that influence it, right? Disease prevalence, the quantity and quality of the nutrients that are offered in the diet, genetics, and so many others, right? The environment, the stress that they go through. And I always joke that, and especially now, I will talk a little bit about some of the software that we developed to do that. It's like, I think on the calf side, we have lacked a little bit on making those goals on our farms. That is our calves growing well? What is the average daily gain goal? It's like, why are you doing what you're doing, right? Like, why I'm feeding 4 quarts? Why is a gallon? Why is X? Like, why don't we discuss the opposite? I think the first thing our problem is to identify we are in that moment, right? That sometimes we need to identify even our goals itself to then discuss what data we need and what is optimal, what is the max, what is the most cost effective that we can do. And actually, I joke that a lot of this, we talk a lot about data and technology and all this modern stuff, and sometimes we still not adopting well some of the technology that we have that are fundamental, right? So if we have a goal of average daily gain, actually, are we actually measuring? Do we use those technologies that we need? Are we getting it correctly? Are we using that data for everything? And I will try to go through that discussion all the way from like, do we have the data, all the way to what to do with that data. And I'm sure that most of us, if you work with calves, we have heard it before. I was just actually discussing with Dr. Jim Kigley in a conference 2 weeks ago where it comes from, right? Like, what was this discussion? What was the first time? I'm getting old actually, but like some of these guys have been in the industry for 40 years or so. I was still like, I don't know, learning how to walk, and these guys were already formulating diet for calves, and why calves have to double their weight by weaning. We've been discussing probably for the last decade that some of these calves should triple their birth weight by weaning, and why, how we do that, why we are targeting those. And the first thing I like to actually was in Cornell a few years ago discussing this at the Advanced Dairy Nutrition Conference, why we use average, why we are going, what is our KPI, how to use those KPIs. And I always like to talk about data quality in general on the farm, because sometimes like if we say our goal is 2 pounds per day, in average we get 2 pounds per day, but we have some calves getting 3.5 and a lot of calves getting 1. The average is very different here than like the gray farm in comparison to the green farm, right? That most of the calves are actually around the average. And we've been working with a lot of farms being like, we should, instead of discuss means, it's how many animals hit the target. For example, if our target, our goal is 1.5 pounds or 800 grams per day, let's make that 85-90% of these calves should be at or above that average daily gain target. Same thing with, we discussed that a lot with passive transfer of colostrum, right? Like our calves, it's not the average. If your average is, I don't know, 12 grams per milliliter of IgG in the blood, that's not good enough if some calves have 55 and you have 10 calves that is zero, right? So I think we should discuss that. And that's more or less is a very simple point, because I will try to build on that. But identifying the goals, the quality of the data, and our targets is fundamental for everything for us to use that data. And I think when we discuss precision livestock farming, when we discuss technology, go back to those fundamentals essential, because to make decisions is good. Because if we go to a farm, are you doing well with your nutritional program? How do we know that? And especially which change can we do to make that happen? So, and technology are a tool, right? Not a solution. And especially because of that, because if we have different goals, we have different technology, different programs, different things that we can actually work on. This is like one of our simulations showing if we want to have half a kilo per day, zero point 0.6 kilos, so a pound and a half, and 2 pounds per day of target. That's very different growth that we are going to achieve on those animals, especially when we distribute maintenance and gain of the nutrients that you are putting through their throat, right? So that will formulate different goals for us to get, especially through time, day 30, day 60, day 90 of these animals, and especially if we are going to use a program, if we are going to individualize the management of these animals, we need to know what are the expectancy that we will see through time. So here, like for example, if you have those things like I simulated 4, 6, 8, or 10 liters per day, or 10 quarts per day, so from 1 gallon to 2.5 gallons per day, those are very different curves of growth, for example. And if we are going to do that, and especially if we are going to use technology to do things like that, we really need to know what we expect to do so. So one of the things that we started, especially because more and more we would go on farms, discuss goals, discuss individualized management, was that idea that what we are feeding for, and especially what we are getting from that output. And we saw that need that we should have a modeling software to do that, and we could use the animals against what is expected from them, what Nathan, Dr. Drakely and his team put together to be like, okay, instead of formulating a diet based on what we expect or what we want them to do, can we do the opposite, right? Because especially in the calf world, most of our diets are formulated in a way that is like, this is what I'm going to provide the animals, and I'm hoping for something. And we did that. We, well, pretty much flip over the nascent model to get what the animals are coming in, what you are feeding them as a diet, and especially giving an output of what is expected from these animals to do. And with that, we could look at the data that the farm is giving and see, are you doing what is expected, are you not? And especially with that, using those outputs to make sure that you are getting to that goal. So if your goal is 2 pounds per day and you're not getting 2 pounds per day, but the model say that you're getting 1.7 pounds per day, what could we change on your diet and use the nascent to kind of predict that expectancy that is working? And that's the idea, right? That we go through some of this modeling and especially seeing the individuals to get to those points. So, and I will use this especially because it's very interesting, that idea that is not always the same, right? So if you feed here 4 to 10 liters per day, you have average daily gains that are very different to time, because you are giving obvious very different amounts of nutrients that go for maintenance and what is going for growth. And especially, are your calves eating solid feed as expected or not eating solid feed as expected, especially when feeding behavior development is influenced for so many factors, right? And with that data, you could create that idea that if we have a goal, if we have a requirement to production, now we are discussing a lot of these calves should triple their body weight by weaning, what is a very high target for a lot of farms, like 2.5, 2.6, 2.9 pounds per day, depending how big your calves are growing. Can we do that? Can we use that 1.3 kilos per day? That is a very high target. And actually, there is a lot of farms doing it, that is having calves at 250 pounds at 70 days at weaning. So if we do that 2.4 pounds per day, and that's what I will use throughout, what are the factors, how we modulate, and especially which data and which technology can we use to get us there. And I'm not here saying, like, I will stop for a second to say that I'm not here that every farm should have the goal of triple their birth weight by weaning, right? Like the idea is like, everyone should work with a goal. But that's the goal that have been discussed, and a lot of farms have that goal right now of 2.2, 2.3 pounds per day, or a little bit above a kilo. And how can we work it back, especially to get most of the animals there, right? Not the average. So how can we increase average daily gain, and especially what are the technology and the data that we can use to do so? I'm using, again, my software doesn't need to be, can be an Excel sheet. We did this with Excel for the last 15 years, but that idea of if we can predict what body weight should be with the diet that we are offering, and we have all this animal data saying this is the body weight, this was the diet that was offered, that's what they are eating. Can we go there and use that data to make that evaluation, right? Of saying, so here the red line would be what Nathan predicted for these animals based on the diet that we gave them, and every dot is a calf, and the blue line is the farm. So very clearly, this farm has like pretty good up to 70 kilos of body weight that is above nascent, but then that is very like, or better, less than nascent for the 70 kilos up, and a very big distribution between those calves. And could we look at that data? How, or better, how do we look at that data and make decisions to see what is going on? Just as a side note, here is a classic example that calves are just not eating and calf starter, right? That's why they do very well in the beginning and then they follow back. Some calves are doing super well, but it's a classic example when BRD or pneumonia start to happen and they just don't eat enough calf starter. But that's not the situation in sí. It's like, how can we actually look at the data, create the technological based data to make decision and improve our management? And many times that we do some of these analysis, people want to know who are the bottom calves to cool them, right? And that is a decision as well. But the idea is like, how could we use that tactically or strategically to make decisions for the future to don't see some of this situation happening? And so I use this class example here, like calves being actually fed at libdom on an automated feeder in one of our experiments. You see throughout time that the average around 10 liters per day. They are weaning 3 weeks. And if we look at the average, it's almost textbook, right? Like they went there and read all the Costa, the Kigley, the Ware's paper, the Box paper, and did very well. But when you plot each calf, it's very different, right? The average is beautiful. The calves are drinking 10 liters per day, but each of those calves, there are calves here, actually they were at max of 15 liters, but many calves doing 15 liters per day, but many calves doing 6, 7, 8, 4.5, sometimes 2 liters a day, 30. And how can we use this information to do well? Again, we could go there and cut all the bottom calves, but that's not the idea, right? It's like, how could we get these calves up to the place that we want? And doesn't need to be the max either, right? And I always like to say that many times I show this data, people are like, I want everyone to drink 15 liters. And I'm like, well, maybe that's not the target that you have. Maybe the target is that everyone drink 8 or 9 or whatever it is. But the idea is how can we diminish that individual variation, or better, we could even use that individual variation to make decisions later on, like efficiency. And one of the classic things for this, and this is I love the show as not doing great, right? Because everyone, I go around the world being like, your farm could do better, right? And I like to show my data to be like, sometimes we suck as well. And that's like one of those classic examples that here the black line is what Nathan predicted that our calves' body weight would be based on the nutrition that they drank, not what they were offered by animal average, and that's what we got. And we can tell again, like up to day 15, 20, my calves are doing super well. And then like, oh, they were lacking that 100 grams per day. And how can we make decisions, especially how can we see? And here's a class, again, not that we are going to watch every data, but this is a class example of late diarrhea throughout many of these animals. So how can we use this data, especially the calf data, that you can see these beautiful calves above average that did like 10, 15% better than what we think that they should be doing. And especially, could we use that to select animals? Could we do that to, I don't know, make sure that the other ones get another week on weaning, things like that, that our animals could do super well. So that would be the type of use of data that we could to make actual decision on farm instead of the biggest problem with data is that we get all this data and we don't know what to do. We don't see value and we stop to collect them. So same thing, right? Like we start the intake, and you can see here classically what Nathan predicted and what happened, and you can tell that there's this big gap. So can we improve that? How can we improve that? And actually, this is my only data that we are above Nathan, and I like to show those exactly for that. Because what happened in, and I know the trials, of course, so what happened in these trials that the calf was not eating the half a kilo per day on day 42 that we expect, and we're eating 200 grams. And could we observe and especially see what the very good calves are doing? Oh, what the very good calves are doing is very good, but really go back to what the bad calves are doing, right? Can we make management decisions to fix that? Could we select animals? Could we treat them differently? Could we use instead of use blank treatments of probiotic of other things, could we actually select these animals to do so? And that's kind of the idea that I will try to go through, first showing this data, and then now, like, I don't want to be like, oh, Joao came here and gave us, oh yeah, the calves all suck, we need to do better, and how to do better, right? And how to use technology to do better is fundamental, and that's what we've been discussing a lot, and especially to transfer that idea that we have bad calves, but we also have great calves. We go there and there are calves here at 50% more grain intake than what Nathan predicted. That is that is normally one of the things that we want, right? Like we have very short milk feeding programs to make sure that we could make them eat grain, get all the nutrition from the solid feed and grow well. So if we know that these calves are doing well, why, how, and especially normally they are not of concern, right? But like, how can we select these animals and do things are also fundamental. So that I will go through that, not average. We are going to talk about individual, especially here we start doing the same thing with that idea, right? Now feed intake is really solid. Feed intake is really hard to get on calves in most farms, even weighing once per day and things like that. But we have a lot of associative data that we can use to do so. And that's what I will try to discuss. And the first one is trying to understand why some of these calves are not doing super well. And I showed this funny photo of Dave Renault that I think is going to be here next week, one of the greatest calf veterinarians in the planet. And I use this data a lot because it's highly associated. I stopped to use the associative data that we did all this modeling to understand how much the calves are affected by disease. And we are able to show that like decreases the efficiency of these animals a lot, and they never achieve nascent. But these data that Dave has from these calves are very good to put in perspective. They got these like 2,500 plus calves throughout time. And one of the things that they did was to go through and really see how in that farm, in that research facility throughout time, each bout of disease affected growth. So the calves on a baseline that were healthy, that just did well on the farm, gained 980 grams per day, so 2.1 pounds per day throughout the weaning and post-weaning program up to 70 days. If they had 1 day of diarrhea, they lost 5 grams per day. If they had 5 days of diarrhea, they lost 180 grams. So 180 grams multiplied by 70 is like around 6 kilos, right? So, and if they had 9 days of diarrhea on that time, they lost, half a pound pretty much, 0.4 pounds per day or 200 grams. 250 grams. So that idea, it's what is happening here, right? Like you have a model of all these animals, Dr. Drakely and everyone spent, 15 years putting together that model, and then your calf gets sick and you lose all that, and we actually can look and model and especially see and actually, well, I'll not discuss it here, but even try to understand what is the economic impact that those diseases are happening, and especially if it's worth the programs that we have to prevent it. Same thing, right? With respiratory, I will not go through the data, but the idea is that you lose a lot of weight in these animals. So how can we translate that idea of the individual calf? So I'm here saying like, oh, if a calf gets X days of diarrhea, it loses X grams of gain. And now to the farm, what is the farm effect? So, because yes, every animal will experience life and nutrition and efficiency and gain by itself, right? Like as a single individual, but that single individual, it's part of that bigger picture that is the farm, where environment, housing system, just routine in general will affect that growth. And to separate those are fundamental. So we did that. We went, like, actually got this very cool data set from thousands and thousands of farms throughout time from Brazil in a partnership with Cria, that is a program of calf consultancy and management in these countries. And we went to got something like 170,000 calves from 140 farms to try to understand that what is animal, what is factors from the farm. So we went through, I will not, I just showed this graph always just to show the distribution that you find in farms all over, right? So if you get this birth weight, for example, that goes from 20 to 50 kilos, obviously with that very high peak around 35, 36, 37 kilos, that is what we expect that a Holsteins will be born at. But first, the first big variation between birth weight, but then the birth weight or the body weight at 60 days, right? So you have calves at 130 kilos, that is 270 pounds, to calves that were 60 kilos, that is pretty much, or better, 45 kilos, that is pretty much some calves' birth weight. And seeing that variation is first very interesting for us. But then when we look at what is this animal all wearing the same diet on the farm, all remove that individual variance, 30% of that variance, it's explained by the farm that they were born. So, well, first there is a take here that is not the one that I'm taking, but the first one is that, like, you are responsible to make your calves grow on your farm for 30%. So doesn't matter what you feed, that is 30%, that is your responsibility to do a good job and offer a good environment. But besides that is understand that all these factors that come together actually plays a big role, and including that on our decision and the use of data, it's fundamental. So obviously, just one that I will point out is the disease, right? That you get like a huge effect of the disease, as I showed before. So if we look through, I will not go through in depth of this complex graph, but there is this very good interaction between the parity of the cow, the gestation length, and the weight of these animals throughout time. And the other one in the left, I think, is the one that is more interesting for today. That is that idea that there is an effect of diarrhea. So if you see the graph from left to right, you see that more diarrhea bouts in this animal, less weight. But then there is also an effect of respiratory disease, but the combined effect, it's much heavier, much harder than the ones in the by itself. And that idea is fundamental, right? That's like, well, first, we shouldn't be getting calves sick in general. Our job is to prevent them. But using that data to understand how much it is, it's fundamental, and especially will be a big part of what I will discuss. So if we go through, I will actually discuss is that we have that idea, right? Like this is not even buying any technology, right? It's just getting the data that we have to make sure that the models that we have can be used for us to make decisions. We can simulate, we can look at your farm conditions, and with that, try to find the factors that are affecting that normally are disease and environment. So, and especially include the economics on that. So major simple thing that can be used, and that's what we've been doing a lot in that architecture of having your expectancy, your goal, and especially where you are feeding in comparison to actually the real output and make decision based on that data. So if we go over the technology in general, that is the idea that, well, first, every data is a data point that we can use for that. And then the next step is like, okay, if we have the right data, if we have the right objectives, if we want to make our KPIs work for us when we are managing animals here, now we have this possibility of buy or get some technology that can be used to collect even more data and help us to make even more decisions. However, to make sure that we have those technology and those tools to help us fix our problems, we need to make sure that we use it right, right? Like I found this funny photo a couple of years ago, and I keep using that. Like, doesn't matter if you go to Home Depot and buy the most expensive drill in the world, and you get home and you don't know how to use it, it probably is going to hurt your efficiency, right? Like, will be a hurdle on your day instead of something that help you. So we have so many options on the calf world right now, right? And sometimes when we discuss those calf options, and I think I'm blame, not blame, I don't think it's a word, but I'm associated a lot with that, with the research that we do. Feels like all these options are the very expensive ones, machines that do everything by itself, that collect all this data, automated feeder and other things that comes, but a lot of the options that we have nowadays is that we need to collect that data, right? Like that we have to have the data. Doesn't matter where it comes from, doesn't matter how much it costs for you. And I'm not saying that the expensive technology is not an option, but it's the idea that we have a lot of tools to do so. So options of technology, actually this week is Eurotier happening in Hanover right now in Germany. I just saw, I just got the email. I couldn't go this year. And I think there is like 72 booths that mention calves technology. So that gives us like the perspective of what is coming and what is happening. So there are so many things. We develop many. I will not go over what we have been working on and developing, but the idea is there are so many things now that we can use and are coming to be used. One of the ideas that I think we need to do, especially on the calf side, is like, can we develop things that are specifically for calves? I'm talking here about something that we are developing for the very long future, but now or in US we have 6 tags or electronic pedometers or ear tags for calves as well, besides the automated feeders that are being developed. So if we have those tools, we know that there are not solutions. What are the problems that we have, and especially think on what we can do to avoid those. And one of the first ones, and I hope that I'm contributing to that today and in general, is that idea that what is happening is that John Smith from Manitowoc County in Wisconsin, right? Like our dairy farmers are going to Madison, are going to anywhere, or even opening up any magazine, and they are faced with all this data that they can buy and they can have from all their cows or their calves, and they are faced with this constant uh, building up of spreadsheets that nothing are being used. You're still milking cows the same way that you have before. I love the like I have there is someone talking about robots all the time, and I always make the joke, right? Like you buy a $250,000 machine that provides 247 variables when each cow is milked, but you just use it to attach a teat to the touch a cup to the teeth and bring milk out, and you don't use that data to make decision on farm. So it's like buying the Ferrari and driving at 20 miles per hour, right, to take your kids to school. So that idea is a major change that we need to have on our scenario. That is like we are creating this data, we need to have insights to make action on farm, and that's fundamental. And I will try to show 2 or 3 examples of how I think we can do some of it. And especially, I talk a lot about how to use the data to go on our environment and change, but how to do the other tags. And I think that the future probably will be here talking about the same thing, but like, because it's a constant evolution and a constant build up of what the tools are, the data are, and what we want for our animals. And I really think that here I'm using the automated feed as the example, but I really think that the idea goes through we put in the brain, our brain, right? Like our centuries of animal science knowledge and research into some of this technology to make decisions for us, and especially getting that knowledge that we have back to make the animals' efficiency and lives and even welfare level increase through time. So one of the first one is, could we actually use this knowledge to, instead of we have very structured and hard programs to feed calves, could we have it more flexible? For example, we have been forever discussing on phase feeding calves, and we even phase feed on the amount, but could we phase feed on the nutritional level? Could we phase feed on the individual level? Could we actually think about those 2 phases separately, right? That we are going to give 4, 5, 6 weeks very concentrated on liquid diet, and then go to a solid feed diet. And I'll use this as a framework, as example. Not that I'm saying that everyone should go home and try to do something similar. But that idea is because exactly that, right? Like we go back now, almost 10 years, where we are like, what if we gave 6, 8, 10 liters, 12 liters for calves and did this step down or weaning for the animals? And even like, I think is one of my most cited papers, like, oh, calves that drink a lot of milk on the beginning, and if you wean them right, they eat more grain because they are bigger, and that works. But the history doesn't end here, right? Like most of these calves actually don't go there, read our papers, because some of them do super well. These animals transition super well into milk to solid feed. But it's a very complex time for a lot of these calves, being where they have to eat, how they have to eat, and what they have to eat. So when we look, I joke, I go around saying that the red line is the beautiful line that is on the papers, right? Like, oh, if you do this, you feed calves a lot of milk. These calves are all drinking 12 liters of milk on the automated feeder. You wean them right, you reduce 50% of the 2000, I think 8 started to do that step down weaning. It works super well, right? Like these calves are much above the metrics that Dr. Hill or Dr. Kigley told us that 15 kilos of CNS would work super well for weaning. However, when you look at every line, the red line is perfect. We even have the fatty ones, right? That is like doing much better than the red line, or much better than we hope them to do. But if you look at the bottom, has calves that are here at day 46 with 0 intake, 56 here was weaning, they are much below as expected. And why is that? Why the weaning period is so important? Can we do something about it? And the first thing that like actually this data made me think a lot, and we are years trying to fix it, is because if you look at the week of grain consumption intake before weaning, it's highly associated to the final body weight of these animals a month later. And now I have the same graph for hundreds and or thousands of calves, and it's almost obvious, right? This is not rocket science. No one is going to go home today and be like, oh, Joao showed me something that I never thought about. This, if the calf is not eating well during weaning, obviously not going to do well on that next month. So the idea is like, could we fix that? Could we do that individually? And it's funny because I go around talking about that with farmers, and most of the farmers be like, oh, that's what we do. If the calf is not eating enough, we just give another week or something like that. But now we have, first, a lot of farms with a lot of animals that cannot do that. Secondly, we think we have data that we could do that or automatically, or at least as a SOP on the farms. So very simple thing that we thought on that data was like, could we use this data to let the calves self-wean? If we had associative data with the amount that they were eating, could we actually wean them automatically? For what we did was to offer these calves 10 liters of milk up to week 4. We reduced 25%, and then every time they hit a target of grain intake, that this was done kind of automatically, but could even be done by hand, right? I have farms now actually that we work with that they just weigh how much grain they put on that whole row of 100 calves. And if they ate more than X, more than 200 grams per day, they reduce another liter, another quart on the bottle. Things like that that can even done by hand. But here we did automatically. The calf hit half a pound. We reduced 25% of the milk, 1.5 pound, another 25. With 3 pounds, they got weaned. And what you see is that like some calves actually we had a calf that weaned itself in 10 days, but most calves will wean very close to the time that we do, and we bring that variation much less than it should. And as expected, they ate much more grain actually than the control group, because some calves were already ready to eat more grain, and we kept feeding them milk, and they obviously would not exchange the milk that was freely available for the grain. But that idea of bringing the resources to the right animal. And it's very funny because we did some more experiments after that. The milk that you use for the whole group is very similar. You just exchange from the calves that eat a lot of grain and are very fast at do so to the ones that are a little bit late. And the ones that have the weaning super early end up being much bigger than the other ones throughout time, up to like 25 pounds after 20 weeks. So is Joao saying that every calf should have an automated grain intake? I don't think so. I think that if we had enough data throughout life, like here, for example, at 30 days of life, we could very likely detect the animals that were not going to do super well at weaning and maybe have a tailor management for them. Like, I'm not going to give any metric, but like half a kilo or a pound per day at day 30, 35 is a great predictor if that animal will be at 15 kilos of CNF or 30 kilos, right? 50 pounds of calf starter by the week of weaning accumulated. So things like that we can make those decisions on farm are fundamental for us to do so. And even more complex, we actually could use all that data together to identify the animals that do super well, and maybe even use that to select animals to do tailor environment. One of those is that we put 10 tags on some of these calves to create a profile, a behavioral profile of these animals. And we are able to identify who is the feed motivated animals. And with that, target association. I'm not here to talk about that. It's a more practical talk, but the idea is that give us all these future possibilities. So if we go back to even how much milk we are going to give to calves, I stole this directly from Nathan and did a translation to liquid, right? Because normally when we are talking about calves, we are talking about quarts or liters. That idea that what is moderate, what is high, where we should distribute that resource is fundamental. And I think that we can, like if this is already established, that's what we are doing. I think the next step is like, could we think about it in a more flexible way throughout time? So could we flexibilize when we are going to give? Could we use different diets throughout time, and especially use technology to help us to do so? And I really think that we need to increase the solid feed intake, and that's what will reduce some of the hunger, some of the body weight, and we need to bring some of this milk early on to get some of the future growth that we need, especially if the environment is right, and we need to use that data to make some of decisions. So here, I'm just going to, actually, I didn't discuss too much the bottom-up approach, but we are using more and more formulated data against outputted data to make those decisions of should we do it automatically? Like, should we have next week a different diet because this is a group of calves that are not eating as expected, or this is a group of calves that are eating too much. We could save some money on the fat, on the protein, on our diets. And I think we are going to be very close to do those things. And one of the big things is like we need to measure variables well. We need to develop modern farm applications, and especially I didn't have the time here, but there is a lot on detecting disease that is fundamental. So for us, we really need to do some efficient and automated early intervention for these animals. And we can do that if we do individualized management. And one of the things that I just want to say is that I was a very nutrition talk today. I didn't even talk too much about disease because, like, I think people are, especially now that Dr. Kent or Melissa is talking so much about that. I like to bring different perspective. But sometimes we are like very concentrated on things like nutrition, disease, and I think we don't need to be so negative or so associative, right? We have this big trial that was brought up from some of the processors. Could we go there and see which are the calves playing well on our farms? Are they playing enough? Can we use those other data as well to make some of the decisions, the environments that we have, the practice that we do? And I think that is fundamental, that technology is coming to bring some of these changes of what we think and especially what we can measure. So I have to say that I do work for the University of Vermont. That's my financial relationship. I was previously at the University of Kentucky. All these people support the 20 people that work here in Burlington doing some of this research that you guys saw. And especially if anyone has any interest or any questions, my email is there, and I'm pretty easy to find, and I'll be more than happy to answer anything that is. Thank you so much for the space.
Thank you so much, Joao. That was so interesting. And I always love watching Cavs play. Like at the end of the day, like
Can go back.
there we
That
go.
can be our background.
There we go. Just at
Okay.
the end of the day, like long day on the farm, and you just watch calves play, or they're just sound asleep because everyone's been fed and they're doing well, and sometimes that's just all you need after a day, and so it's so nice seeing that because we sometimes do that with our straw as well. We sometimes leave it up in piles because we know they like to do exactly what they're
Yep.
doing with the sawdust there. It's just
Well, that
running
was
it
a
around.
prop. I'm sure as an experiment, but that was a prop for the video for to talk about the experiment, right? We just
Hey,
2 bags of sawdust to make sure that we got a good video.
there you go. Yeah. So, it was really interesting when talking about some of the nutrition um, that you brought up when talking about hunger, and it made me wonder if sometimes, and this is me totally speculating. So, are we pushing um intake too hard on some of these calves where they're not getting hungry, but we're trying to meet a mark saying they need X intake. So whether that means we're gonna tube feed these calves so that we know they have X amount of colostrum in them, and could that almost cause no hunger and then we see a drop in intake? Or the, I guess, what are your thoughts on that when we're trying so hard to reach a number because that's what we've been told is good, but could that be almost shooting ourselves in the foot?
So, well, first, there is a lot of factors to this question, right?
Yeah.
Like there are many places and time and contexts for this. But one of the things, like the first one is that I think we made calves, there is this hunger level that affect animal welfare that
Hmm.
we put calves through for very long, and that became a very high concern, right? To the
Mm-hmm.
point that now actually NASEM goes there and have recommendation, and many countries don't even allow you to be in some of these very low levels of milk intake for the
Mm-hmm.
cows, because that really causes a very high level and constant hunger for these animals. And that was, it still is, right? Like if you think
Right.
around the world, a big concern for animal welfare of calves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's highly associated with milk intake, because for the first 4 to 7 weeks, depending the management that we have, most of these calves don't are not able to eat solid feed to a level
Right.
that supply their nutrients and hold on that hunger level. But there are other side to that, right? Like in for calves, and that's my my opinion and my thoughts, and especially a lot of our research have shown that not every calf will achieve the level of intake
Mm-hmm.
then our very intensified system are putting as goal.
Mm-hmm.
So when, especially now, the discussion of calves to triple their body weight through pre-weaning, from 0 to 70, 0 to 80 days, a lot of calves will not do so if we
Mm-hmm.
give them in normal condition, right? Like even at Lipton milk, very good start. The environment, that's just not it. So well, first, I'm completely against a force feed animals, right? Obvious there are places and disease and things like that. We
Mm-hmm.
should not have a system that we force feed any animal. But understanding how we can do to get most of our calves there to
Mm-hmm.
those goals are fundamental, right? And there are many things around the environment, feed presentation,
Mm-hmm.
competitiveness, heat stress, especially cold and heat stress, but especially heat stress that goes through.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been doing like great strides to fix it, and I think that's part of, as an industry, our goal is to tomorrow be better than today, right? And
Mm.
today be better than yesterday. And I think that is part of it. But also there are other side that's like maybe our goals are too high to some animals in some environments, and adjusting the goals are also fundamental. The thing about like especially around colostrum, that are more like there are other side as well, that sometimes we need to make compromise on one side to get the other right,
Right.
right? Same thing with disease. I do a lot of work with supporting therapy. Sometimes supporting therapy and the intakes that we need, the delivery of some nutrients, goes through a little bit more than let the calf, go there and eat. And I think that's because has a bigger gain than what
Right.
we lose make them not hungry.
Right. Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. So we did have a question come in. The question is, when balancing cost and effectiveness of technologies, what are your top 2 to 3 recommendations for technologies that farmers should invest in?
Well, that's a very good question. The first one, are you going to use it?
Yeah.
And you're going to use, no, you're going to use it continuously and through time. So that is the first, and I do that with a lot of, startups and even bigger companies. Like, how to approach the industry in a way that it becomes part of the daily management. And when
Mm,
I say daily management, doesn't need that you need to go on the app every day or you need to be concerned with every day, but every day it affects the way you do things and your efficiency.
does it fit well
Does it
within
fit
what
well
your
and is
goals
going
are?
to be
Yeah.
used? The worst thing that can happen is a technology that just sits there and doesn't help you
And
in anything.
collects data, right?
Exactly. That collects data to nobody. Don't be used ever. Like my Fitbit that
Yeah.
tells me like I never looked that I walked 50 steps today, right? The second one is does like what are the replacements? So one of the classic examples is like I'm I always can pay somebody to collect most of the data that the technology will do, but am I going to? Does it fit on my management? Can I actually use that data to make decisions that will pay off and make that ROI? It's funny because we do ROIs with everything, and then with technology, more or less like, and ROI doesn't need to be just on economics, right? Like I think the robot is there to show us that sometimes the economics is not the most economical way to milk cows,
Mm-hmm.
but gives 20 other factors like life flexibility, not having X, Y, and Z, collect data that plays out on the ROI. So definitely, are you going to use or not? You have time to use. Second, does it change the way you do to a positive way? Does it make a farm more efficient? Can you do things? And the third and very important one is that is there a problem that is fundamental
Mm.
today? Because if not, I think we should focus on the big problems, right? So for calves, I will talk about here calves. I'm not talking today about cows, but detecting disease on farm, it's a problem to most of the farms.
Mm-hmm.
It's a priority, right? We treat animals late, we take too long, we you have to come with an atomic bomb because it has passed the
Right.
time that we could use a supporting therapy.
Right.
So having a technology that detect disease is probably more important than, let's say, even me. I showed today a lot like grain intake at 30
Mm-hmm.
days. Because if you are doing the weaning somewhat correctly, you can use some of our metrics, you might be doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think there are technologies that are coming and we can do some of it on the nutrition side to be more efficient. But if you have this elephant on your farm that kill calves like
Right.
BRD or diarrhea, focus on priority is fundamental. So our my say is that like don't fall to what is being offered, but think on what you need
Mm-hmm.
and make decisions on the technology based on what you need and your biggest problems.
Yeah. So when a farm is considering implementing a new technology, rather than saying, well, can we afford it? Does it make, is it effective for XYZ? Ask that almost that bottom up where it's like, is it, is there something that's critically wrong in the farm that we're trying to use this to band-aid?
Yeah.
Or is there something that's critically wrong and could this tool help us detect it sooner?
Well, in
Different
real
ways of
life,
thinking about it,
obviously,
right?
no, but in real life, obviously, we live in this interaction, right? What is being offered, what is commercially
Right.
available, what people are using. But I think a big exercise here, it's like to start on the problems, right?
Hmm.
Like, what are the problems that I'm trying to fix on my farm? What are the tools that are available to fix that problem? And then can we manage it on our farm, in our situation, and will it be efficiently? I think
Right.
this is a much better roadmap than the opposite, right? I was walking through the barns in Madison and I saw that this technology can do that, and then decide
Right.
who is going to use and how I'm going to use it. Am I going to make money based on that? And it will solve that problem. So I think
Right.
that's the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I really like that approach because rather than just saying, yeah, I want this new shiny toy or this new shiny tool that I'll get data from. Okay, that's great, but why? What are
Yeah.
you going to use it for? How are you going to make
Well,
decisions off of it? And that's such a big thing that I've noticed, even something that I'm continuously working on as a educator and advisor of how do I read and interpret this data and what do I get out of it? So when you were talking about, let's not focus on the average, let's focus on, y- your quartiles almost like who's at the high quartile, who's at the bottom quartile, and what's all happening that's getting those calves in those different spots. And then figure out what management wise do we need to do to either adjust, get those calves in the bottom up, and get things more along to where we know these calves are going to become successful cows and they are going to have longevity and they're going to be the golden girls that stay in the herd, that build the herd's continual foundation over time, because that's what matters. We're looking not just at cows that are going to make a ton of milk. We are so focused on overall production, but also lifetime production and lifetime health and wellness. And it makes me really happy that the industry has shifted to that focus and we're bringing the calf and heifer discussion along with it now. And so, just that push and seeing more research come out has just been huge in my opinion because it's like, okay, we're really getting the full circle involved in this conversation now. So,
And just actually, I talk a lot. People, I'm sure my joke is getting old, but I always talk about bar technology, right? The last thing that we can have is technology that just work for you to tell other folks in the bar that is on your farm.
yeah,
And I always talk about the real-time technology, the real location systems that the first time I went to a farm to see, I asked what the guy was using for, and the only thing he was using for at that time was to like, oh, I want to know where my favorite cows are in the barn when I want to go see them. What like I'm not saying that is wrong. People can use their money on whatever they want, but like I think we need more, right? Like, oh, to find them to breeding, to find them to this, to do heat maps
right,
on the farm. So if you are at that level, great. But like to buy technology just to like open the app and know what's going on is like not interesting
right, right. Yeah,
as a business perspective, at least.
right. What added value can you get out of this? The data that you're already making on the farm, honestly, like how everything has an RFID nowadays. So what data are we getting from those animals, whether we're collecting stuff in the parlor, whether it's just very, very simple data points of she has a heat, she got bred, this is what she did calving wise. But what can you actually pull out of that? And then say, well, do you really need this technology? What you're already doing, we can make it happen with what you have. So, yeah, just looking at things with a different perspective and bringing that in. So, we are at time a little bit over, but that's all right. Let me wrap up the webinar real quick and let's get that going. There we go. All right. Again, I would like to thank everyone for joining Dr. Costa and I today for this session on precision livestock technology and its implementation in calves and heifers. And if you have any questions after today's session, feel free to reach out to him or I, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. And before you head out today, please fill out the post-session survey to let us know what you thought about today's topic, any additional follow-up topics you'd like to hear about, and what you took away from today's session. So once again, thank you, Dr. Costa, so much for the wonderful information, knowledge, and experience you shared with us today. We're very honored to have you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thank you so much, Cara.